Honestly, I kind of regret asking them to show me how they burlesque. I think it's fair to say that Burlesque is the show that everyone is speaking about at the moment. Maybe not for the reasons that they would like, but hey, any press is good press. While this production, based on the 2010 film of the same name, has been through multiple off-West End tryouts in Manchester, Glasgow, Manchester again, this West End production comes with quite a lot of changes that highlight some of the behind-the-scenes drama of the show. Between those tryouts and now, a lot of members of the creative team have departed the production, including their choreographers and their director Nick Winston, with Todrick Hall taking up both of those mantles. So even though this is a show that has workshopped itself, it is still coming into the West End on the back foot. And I think that's important context to know about this production. I don't really want to go into the reasons why the drama happened. I just want to highlight that because I feel like it's an important thing to note as we look at what's happened with Burlesque now. Because Burlesque is very messy as a show. And so let's explore why. Why didn't I like Burlesque? What worked in this production? And what needs work? Let's find out. But if you haven't seen my face before, hi, I'm Ellie. I talk about theatre. I am the most chaotic theatre person on the internet. I do reviews, I do discussions, I do versus brackets, rankings, game shows, so much more. And if any of that sounds interesting to you, please consider hitting like and subscribe. It really helps me out helps out the channel. But let's dive in to Burlesque. Welcome to Burlesque. If you come into Burlesque and you are expecting the film, that's not what you're going to get here. And I think that's probably the most baffling thing to me, because I don't think what they replace the film's plot with is stronger. Now, we have so many film to musical adaptations now, and we've seen how these all tackle it. And I am like the number one person, the number one defender of the fact that when you are taking a piece of fiction, a story, from one medium to another, there have to be changes. A film is completely different to a musical. They have different styles, different tones, and when you are taking a story, some things that worked when you told that as a film would not work if you just took that and placed it into a musical. Changes have to happen. But the changes to Burlesque, I don't know if many of these are massively beneficial. I think it's even weirder to think about this when you realize that the film is written and directed by the same person who's written the musical. So you would expect if anyone is going to get to understand what the original was trying to do, then it would be Stephen Anton. But I struggle to see if what they're presenting isn't really stronger and is going to upset people who really love the film and are going to Burlesque for a version of the film on stage, then why are we changing it so fundamentally? I'd like to compare this for a moment to Beetlejuice, because I think when I'm looking at films that massively change the story they're telling for a different medium, I think Beetlejuice is a great example of that, because their main goal in adapting that musical was to slightly change the target demographic. That original film was written with the Maitlands as the protagonists, but the musical wanted to more so focus on Lydia and Beetlejuice. So a lot of the plot changes come just naturally through that slight shift of focus, and who our main protagonists are through the story. The outline of that original film is still the same. If you break it down, if you simplify it to its tiniest elements, the beat by beat by beat, Beetlejuice the film and Beetlejuice the musical are the same. But I can't say that about Burlesque. Now, I very purposely went into Burlesque blind. I went into Burlesque without knowing that original film because I like, if I haven't seen the film beforehand and I know that there's a musical adaptation coming, I like to go in blind, because then I can see how it stands up on its own, and then I can engage in the film, I can look at the plot, I can watch it and see that original piece to contrast it after, so I can have both perspectives. So now I'm a little bit more familiar on that plot of the film, I can kind of speak about both a little bit. Now, I'm going to explain the plot of the musical Burlesque, and you can kind of see where the changes come. Burlesque the Musical follows Ali Rose. She is a singer in a church choir where she's standing out a little bit too much. She soon finds out that her birth mother lives in New York City and runs a burlesque club, so she goes off to find her. She is given 21 million opportunities to tell Tess who she is, and doesn't every single time. She embarrasses herself, she messes up some costumes, but eventually, thanks to some help from a boy behind the bar, she ends up getting a job there and eventually climbing her way through the club to be their number one act. The biggest change here is that dynamic between Ali and Tess. The family relationship is much more the focus here than Ali's goals of rising up. Like, her whole purpose and her whole motivation in the original film is that she wants to be a performer. Here, it's kind of mentioned and touched on, but she just kind of goes with it because she likes singing. Like, it's not the main thing that drives her, and I think this kind of muddies the water a lot. I don't love Ali's character in this show, and I feel like I really struggle to get behind her. The musical just kind of acts like there's no good opportunity for Ali to tell Tess who she is, while also showing us a million opportunities where Ali could tell Tess who she is. So that being like the main motivation for her in this musical is strange. It's not a choice that really works. It feels like an idea that would need to be refined and slightly more focused on if they wanted that to be the main drive. And also, because of that, the performance stuff kind of just comes out of left field, and it feels like these two ideas and these two plot lines kind of battling against each other for stage time, and neither of them really feeling like they get enough time to be the main focus. Honestly, I feel like I would much rather the family idea be the background and the performance side be the front. But I also massively struggle with the character of Ali because I think this musical, through the plot, gives her everything a little bit too easily. It feels like she's having to prove herself in places where she doesn't have to prove herself, and then when she gets her opportunity, she just immediately wins and immediately sells it. It's like the whole culmination of the end of the first act is this moment where she takes the stage and proves that she's an amazing performer, but there's no tension in it because she immediately steps on stage and is incredible. She's riffing to high heaven. Jess Foley is an absolute star, but it's kind of doing a disservice to her because there's no growth in it. There's a real lack of a build. I think it's hard to find a storyline as satisfying as an underdog story. Someone rising through the ranks, becoming stronger and stronger and stronger, and proving themselves in these moments. But the reason that these work is because there's the journey, there's the growth. And this plot skips the growth. So when she takes up that stage and she's incredible, yeah, I can understand that she is good, but I don't feel it. I don't feel that growth. It comes too easy. And so I'm kind of struggling to really relate or root for Ali in this musical. And so much of this story kind of hinges on me rooting for her. So if I don't, you can kind of start to see why a lot of this book didn't work for me. It's also a plot that's been stretched so thin. There's a lot of focus on a lot of characters who feel like if you gave them just a little bit less stage time, you'd have more time to develop Ali as a character, as a figure, and give her a much more satisfying journey that I know that she could have. I think a lot of these characters are really underbaked. The villains feel like they get absolutely nothing. Vince is a very one-dimensional villain. His motivations are a little bit clunky. Like, he wants to own the club because he's in debt. His plan makes so little sense. He recruits a girl called Nikki, who in the film is like a main rival to Ali, but here she's just kind of there. And she has this really unbelievable, massive shift in her perspective and character that happens off stage and we never see it. And in contrast to that, we see the character of Sean way too much. Todrick Hall's Sean is that type of gay best friend character who's just kind of there. The type of character who's just kind of talked at. Think very much like Nigel from Devil Wears Prada. Very much taking you under their wing and giving you advice here and there, but not really having much character for themselves. But the thing is, Sean gets so much stage time, and yet I still don't really feel like I know who they are. Like, beyond how they link into everyone else. I think it's a musical that needs to rethink a lot of its focus. I need a lot more time with Ali. I need clearer and more defined character motivations. I need to see that real journey. And it's not really a case of having to add things here. I think it's a fact of just taking up the fluff and building upon what's here, because I don't think it's a fundamentally broken plot. Yes, it's very simple. Yes, it's kind of stereotypical, but I'm not expecting high art out of Burlesque the Musical, you know? Give me a simple story that works, and I would probably be a lot more satisfied. Because, you know, my main focus here is gonna be on the choreography, on the dances, and the flashiness, and the big wow factor of it all. The commercial factor of it, that's kind of what you're here for. I'll also say, the comedy of this musical really didn't click with me. This is the type of musical that just throws out a million pop culture references and expects you to laugh because you know who those people are. And it leans so much on that style of comedy that it kind of feels like panto or even parody at a point. There are some that do genuinely work. And there's some that are very clearly improv moments where even the cast did break, like a reference to the very recent Coldplay concert fiasco. But there's a lot of the time where it feels like its comedic timing is really off. There's a really funny gag that they do when Tess and Ali first see each other. Everything goes like starry-eyed and bright and colourful, and it cuts off that tension by Tess going, "Who the f*** is this?" That is a genuinely funny idea. That's a really funny joke. But the timing is off. That comes in a little bit too soon. It feels like they're rushing it. Trying to get through all these jokes so quickly that you haven't really given the time for this genuinely funny joke to actually land properly. But that is something that can be worked on. That is something that can be improved as a show continues and continues on, as the performers get more used to that material. I think comedy a lot of the time is quite subjective, and so much of it hinges on these pop culture references and these name drops, rather than the stuff here that does actually land quite well. There's also moments where they literally explain the jokes as they're saying it, and I'm like, come on. I also want to briefly speak about the non-binary character in this musical, because I think this is probably one of the weaker pieces of representation that the trans community have in the West End right now. This is the character of Chardonnay, and their role in this musical is extremely minimal. They barely say a word in this musical. They have no presence for themselves. They're just kind of shut down a lot of time. Like, a lot of this musical just focuses on the attitudes around Chardonnay, than actually giving Chardonnay a voice at all. Like, I don't think it's very good representation to have a trans character who barely has a voice for themselves, and because they have no voice, their one character trait ends up just kind of being their body. Like, that's the only thing you can really latch on to about them. It's really, really poorly handled, really messily written. They also, for some reason, make Orphe's character transphobic. When it's like, that's the character we should be rooting for. Why is she the one who's transphobic? What's going on? You work in a burlesque club. Have you never met a trans person before? Like, I'd maybe understand if it was like Vince or like someone outside of the club, but you work in burlesque. It's a strange addition. It really doesn't work. And especially in a time where the trans community, we're not really having the best time. I think this was a pretty big misfire. I don't think this is a book that's impossible to neaten up. Even not taking anything more from the film, just looking at this on its own. I do think there is a world where they could tighten a lot of this up and improve it, but it's very messy. There's weird character motivations, there's shifts in motivations that happen off stage, and because of that, I don't really get why they're happening. It's overstretched, it's padded itself so much to a point where it was literally 3 hours in previews. And even now that they've managed to cut it down to 2 hours 45, it still feels like there's so much fluff here. This book just isn't ready yet. And I think there's a lot of tightening they need to do to those motivations, to these characters, to make sure it really does work. But on the other side of the material here, we have the music. This is a score that has many cooks in the kitchen. I mean, even if we just look at the material from the film, you have songs by Christina Aguilera, you have Sia, who wrote songs, Samuel Dixon, Christopher Stewart, Claude Kelly. You have songs by Etta James, Charlie Midnight, Matthew Gerard, Steve Lindsay, John Shand. Like, there's so many artists on this. And this musical adds additional songs written by Todrick Hall, and one new song by Jess Foley, who plays Ali. I think Todrick's score is probably the weakest out of the editions. He does have a really strong number that he gets, which is called Big, which is this big, flashy production number that explains the history of burlesque. It goes to so many different places, it's jumping here, there, and everywhere. It's actually quite a lot of fun, not just in a staging perspective, but also when you look at it lyrically. I think that's the place where his style works the best. Where it works the weakest is some of his incidental songs. There's these like 1 minute additional sequences in the club for the burlesque girls that feel completely unnecessary. I honestly assume they're only really here to justify some set changes or to get us from one place to another, but these songs, these may be some of my least favourite musical theatre songs I've heard in a while. And I get that in context, these numbers are meant to be a little bit overdone, a little bit tired. It's literally Ali's whole argument of why she wants to take the stage and reinvent the club a little bit. But these stop the action, like, dead in its tracks. They're really sluggish to get through. And the staging of these numbers are never impressive enough to justify them being here, while the performers are great in them. I think a lot of Todrick's score blends together. His music kind of all fits into this very similar style, which I'll just kind of casually reference to as gay pop, which, you know, makes sense. That's kind of the style that he engages in the most. But it's a lot of songs with these really fast-paced lyrics that when you think about them and you break them down, are kind of weak lyrically. I wouldn't say it's a terrible score, but I think what does make it struggle more and what makes it stand out more is the fact that you have that right next to songs like Show Me How You Burlesque, right next to Welcome to Burlesque, right next to You Haven't Seen the Last of Me. These incredibly catchy numbers, these big standout moments, these still are the highlights of the score. And I feel like if I was a fan of the original film, I could probably hide that criticism behind, oh, maybe I'm just nostalgic for them. But apart from Show Me How You Burlesque, which I only know because it was a lip sync song on Drag Race last week, I don't know any of these other songs. I don't have that nostalgia for them, but still, I can kind of see that these are the strongest moments of that score. And I think maybe it would have been stronger to bring in Todrick Hall, who does some good work here, but have him work alongside some of the writers of the original music, maybe working alongside Christina Aguilera, to craft the score as a whole, because it kind of feels like these different pieces that don't really properly connect. Todrick's vibe of his music and how he writes is completely different to how Christina Aguilera wrote, how Sia wrote, so it doesn't really come together amazingly well. Now, obviously, Todrick wrote a lot more material for this show, so it kind of makes sense that there's some in here that I like and some that I don't. However, I really, really like Jess Folly's song. It's a really lovely, kind of intimate moment for Ali as she's traveling from Iowa to New York. This really touching and beautiful I Want song as she's explaining herself, as she's traveling, as she's getting ready, she's on the verge of this massive change in her life. It's really sweet. It does a great job bringing you into that character. I don't think it massively stands out against some of the other songs, but still fits very well into like a musical theatre aesthetic. I really was impressed by it. But on the other hand, it feels like some of the songs from the film get a lot more time than others. Let's talk about You Haven't Seen the Last of Me. Now, this was a whole palaver that happened when first preview hit, and I don't think it was in the off West End tryouts either. They didn't include the Oscar-winning song from the film. They have rectified this now and added it back in, but it's only like a tiny little section, and it feels so strangely placed into this musical, coming at a point where the emotions of the scene don't really feel like they massively match the lyrics and the vibe of the song. I think it's strange that we don't really have the time here to do the full version of the song, because really this should be one of the big moments in the show, and it kind of doesn't really feel like it's given that. I think to really compare what it feels like, imagine if in Frozen the Musical they just did the final verse of Let It Go. Like, it's just kind of this small moment and then you immediately move on. Imagine if in Beauty and the Beast they just hint to be our guest. They don't do the big massive dance sequence. They just hint at it. They just think be our guest and move on to the next scene. Like, this is the song. This is the Oscar-winning song. And it just kind of feels like it's skipped over when it should be the moment. So yeah, when it comes to the score, I think it does have its moments, and I do think there's ways that they can tweak it. I do think there's a lot of things that they can cut out. So looking at the material of the musical as a whole, honestly, it just doesn't really feel ready yet. A lot of it feels underbaked. A lot of the plot lines feel like they need a couple extra additions or some retweaks in here. There's a lot of songs in here that feel like they're just kind of filler and could definitely be taken out and replaced with something a bit more substantial. Obviously, there's some personal issues I have with it that are harder to address. I think just naturally because of how it's been written and what's been written by who, it is going to feel a little bit disjointed and a little bit unbalanced in a structural sense. And I do think those original songs from the film are always going to stand out more. But there's definitely strong tweaks they could make here. Let's next touch on the direction and the choreography, both of which is being tackled by Todrick Hall. First of all, I'll start with what I liked. There is a strong energy behind this show. I cannot really fault it for that. I think it is undeniably energetic, and it's got so many flips and tricks, and it's throwing everything in. I think if you're going to Burlesque and you're looking for a show that is a massive spectacle, I do think genuinely they have delivered on that. With that said, and my appreciation for that aside, I do think it's a bit too much in places. You know, this is gonna be really silly. You know that scene in Incredibles where Syndrome the villain he's laying out his plan and he's saying how he's going to make everyone a superhero, and he goes, when everyone is super, no one will be. That's a little bit of my feeling when I came out of Burlesque, when everything is spectacle and flash and tricks and flips and big, then it all kind of just feels like it's at that same level instead of really giving me those certain moments where I'm like, that's what really stood out, or like that's the moment that really impressed me, because it's all kind of energy and big and flash and flipped. Like, I feel like if you counted the amount of times someone does a backflip on stage and like gets from one side of the stage to the other doing backflips, you'd probably have a count up into the hundreds. And I think a lot of the time, sometimes these tricks kind of blend together in a way that it kind of undermines itself and makes itself less impressive. When I've seen a trick and a flip for the millionth time, it's not gonna be as cool as the first time you did the trick and the flip. I think definitely when I first walked out, I was a lot harsher on that. And I feel like now that I've kind of had a day to think about it and to dwell on it, I'm a bit more forgiving because, like, you have to appreciate the energy and the effort that has gone in to staging and choreographing this. Is it the kitchen sink approach? Yes, but I don't think that makes it less impressive. I think out of everything Todrick does in this show, his choreography is probably my favourite. He's got a strong talent for it, and yeah, it is very, very impressive. I can't really say the same about his direction, though. There's a lot of staging choices that feel a little bit messy. There's a lot of moments that feel a little bit unpolished. And I think this is something that just likely comes from the fact that he's doing everything. It is incredibly hard to work on a show and have this many hats. Even the most talented people would struggle to do this. To write, to direct, to choreograph, to be in it as well. And I wonder if Todrick has stretched himself a little bit too thin on this. I think it's hard to say because I don't dislike what he presents here. And I do think that being able to focus on one or two of these elements, being able to really give his all to just the choreography or just the music that he's written or just these few areas, he would be able to make it even stronger. Because there is so much potential with these dances and with this staging, but is focusing in so many places that I'm not sure it's quite got the polish I want to see. If you're asking me at the end of the day, what am I most positive on about Burlesque, I would say it is their choreography. There's many really cool numbers staged. And let's speak about the design of this show. The set and everything. And I like pieces of it, but I think one of my main criticisms is that I'm not sure the Savoy is the right stage for it. Especially not with how they've laid it out. They've placed this proscenium, which looks really, really good. It looks gorgeous. Not sure it's the right vibe for Burlesque, but it does look very good. But the way that this proscenium has laid itself out, it's kind of squashed the stage even more, and the Savoy isn't really a massive stage to begin with. So they've cut off about what must be about 10% of their potential stage. And I think this has a knock-on effect of a lot of things. When we go into the club and we have these sections come in, these really beautiful boxes that create this theatre, we're left with a very, very tiny, intimate performance space. And a lot of the time it feels like when we're trying to do the big, flashy numbers, and we've got a million people on stage, there's too much here and it's too cluttered. One moment that literally happens at the start of the show is that Orphe comes on as Tess to say a line, and she's like hidden behind like 5 dancers because there's just simply no space on the stage for her to come onto. Which is another thing when I'm saying about these little touches and this little polish that I'm really expecting in a commercial produced piece of theatre like this. So cutting off their stage is a strange choice because it really does feel like it needs every inch of that stage that it can get. As I said, the Burlesque Club set looks nice. I like when they bring in the bar as well. They have this giant, I assume it's an LED screen at the back, and they have a lot of video design that goes on that. When it's incorporated into other set pieces, I do think it looks really nice. When we're in the bedroom, I think it looks really, really good. I think we're in the club and we have the main bar set in front of it. I think it really helps to bring it to life. When I don't really like it is when it's the only focus. I think there's elements of the video design that look a little bit fake. It's got that kind of fake sheen on it that I'm not a massive fan of. We get like a lot of travel sequences, and it happens a lot in the choreography where it's like very specifically timed to shift and move around perspectives, and I feel like it looks a little bit weird on stage for it to be doing this. So I'm a little bit mixed on my feelings on the actual video design of the show. And one final thing I'll mention here is they do a lot of live filming. There's some moments where this really, really does work. They have a camera that's attached to one of the dress circles, which live films during songs like Express. And because of the style of that song, it doesn't really matter massively about how great the camera quality is. Because they've got a lot of filters over it, they've got a lot of text going on the screen, like those kind of sequences where the video design really, really works for me. I think it looks gorgeous there. But the way that they foil the villain is very much linked into a live film section where they're trying to make a video to embarrass him. I think that's the plot. Honestly, the plot is so bare, that might not even be the plot, but I didn't say it was a great plan, but it's the plan they come up with. So. But it involves Paul French holding a camera which isn't really staged in the best way to do that. Now, there's obviously parallels we're going to draw right now to Sunset Boulevard, mainly because it's in the exact same theatre that Sunset Boulevard was in, but, you know, they have this camera on stage, but the way that they stage the camera feels like a lot of the time we're getting really weird angles on these characters, and a lot of the time we're seeing like bits of the back wall and the back of people's heads on the live film, to a point where you're like, why are we projecting it on the back wall if we're not going to be very careful about how we stage it? And also, the live film section is kind of incorporated into the bar set, which also kind of hinders a lot of the quality. Because we're seeing it through, like, a glass window on a very shaky camera that's not really massively high quality. I think it's a neat idea, but they need to be a lot more careful with how they stage it to make sure it gets the effect that they want. Because right now, I watch it and I kind of wonder why we're even seeing the perspective from the camera anyway. You know, you could just hand Paul French a camcorder and save the effort. Well, I've kind of been back and forth on my thoughts on a lot of this production and a lot of the work that's gone into it. I feel like I'm fairly positive on this cast. I feel like a lot of them are hindered by some of this material, but I do think they all do a good job. Jess Foley, playing Ali, she is an absolute star. Her singing is incredible, her vocals phenomenal, the riffs, and she is an absolute star. She has got pipes for days. And I do think she is genuinely sweet as Ali as well. But I think it just comes off a little bit too easy sometimes because of the nature of this book, which kind of softens how spectacular she actually is. But with that said, I would love to see Jess Foley more on a West End stage. Honestly, I would pay a lot of money to hear those vocals again. Oh, she is good. She is someone to keep your eye on. I'm so glad that Author has finally made her West End debut. She is a performer who I have loved for a very long time. When I first listened to the cast album of Legally Blonde, oh boy, I was obsessed. And yeah, she's great here too. She's stern and strong, she's got a great stage presence, vocally she's amazing. I think she really sells a lot of these character conflicts that are very important for her character. I'm just very pleased we finally get to see her on a stage. Todrick Hall has certainly got energy as the character of Sean. And this is a very committed performance, you have to give him that. I think this is a character that I sometimes struggled a little bit more with, just because I don't think all of the one-liners of the comedy quite landed. He gets a lot of the pop culture references in these moments that I was just really not a fan of, as I've explained. And I think there's not really too much character behind Sean, which does make Todrick's job even harder, on top of also directing, choreographing, doing this, that, and the other, getting tea for everyone, going down the pub, getting a pint, bring it back to the theatre, you know, the 20 million other jobs Todrick Hall is doing on this production. But he has some very clear stand-up moments, especially his performance of the song Big. I think Paul Jacob French in the role of Jackson is probably one of the most grounded characters. I really, really enjoy him. I think he strikes up a great relationship with Jess Foley's Ali. I think those two work really well as a pair together. It's quite nice to have this more grounded figure among a lot of these other over-exaggerated characters. I really enjoyed his portrayal. George Maguire as Vince, he's given such a strange character that I don't really get the presence of massively. He's a very one-dimensional, over-exaggerated villain, and if you're looking at that as the prompt, I do think George Maguire hits it. He's British. I'm not sure why, but he's British. And he has that very posh, very egotistical style, like, type of British accent. Which, I mean, does just kind of make him instantly unlikable anyway, so... I mean, he's hit the brief. We have our other villain, Nikki, who is played by Asha Parker Wallace, who has some questionable character motivations. But I think what this performance really does set out and lay out is that clear rivalry. There's a really interesting dynamic between her and Ali that is very fun to follow between these two performances. And a quick shout out to this incredible ensemble and all of our burlesque girls as well. God, I can only imagine exerting yourself this much for a show with tricks and flips and everything. It's genuinely impressive stuff, and this ensemble are giving it to you. Burlesque is a show that I feel like it's understandable why it doesn't quite come together. It feels like this creative team have had to really fight over the past couple of weeks to pull everything together because of things going on behind the scenes. What they present in the end is a little bit unpolished. It's messy. And I think it is likely going to upset a lot of diehard fans of that original film. I just personally don't think this piece is quite ready for the West End. And that's not to say it will never be, because there's definitely a lot of potential in what you're coming to burlesque for. The choreography is undeniably strong. And even the areas where I'm a little bit uncertain of it, there is clear potential for them to tweak and improve it with a lot of the comedy, with a lot of the timing of things. I feel like I probably could have enjoyed this musical more if I just really shut off my brain. That little over-analytical part of my brain that likes to analyze things, because I do think it is successful with the flashing lights and the big choreography and everything. But I don't think this is a production that is ready for the West End yet, and I do think that's a shame, and I really wish I did enjoy it more. But what do you think? What did you think of Burlesque? Did you enjoy it? Do you agree with me that there's some flaws and some things that they need to work on and improve? Let me know all your thoughts on this musical in the comments down below. If you did enjoy this video, please consider hitting like and subscribe. It really helps me, it helps the channel. Here's some links to some other videos I'm scrolling now, and a link to my Instagram if you'd like to drop me a follow over there. And a huge thank you to our lovely channel members for supporting me and what I do over here. But that's it for me today, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!